Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 54 of It's Never Sunny in Seattle, a Seattle Mariners podcast. I'm your host, Anders Jorstad. You may notice I am not, in fact, Mr. Evan James, but I am joined alongside the one and only Michael Ahedo. And Mikey, the Mariners, they finally did a thing, and I think it's worth talking about. They, in fact, traded for the one and only Luis Castillo, which I don't know about you, but had kind of resigned myself away from the idea that they were going to get a marquee name. Because if you think about Jerry up until this point, all Jerry ever does is you think he's going to do one thing and then he does something totally unexpected. Like, for example, Robbie Ray was never on anybody's radar. Pretty much every free agent starting pitcher except for Robbie Ray was, right? It was, oh, are they going to get Marcus Stroman? Are they going to get Kevin Gossman? And then he gets Ray. Jesse Winker, I feel like, wasn't really a piece that was talked about either. When people talk about the Reds, it was like, oh, they could get Moustakas plus Tyler Mahle or something. So I thought he would do something creative here. Instead, he does the unthinkable and outbids, it turns out, a dozen teams, including the Yankees and Rangers, who were apparently very close to getting Castillo. In doing so, gives up our top two prospects, infielders Noelvi Marte and Edwin Arroyo, starting pitching prospect Levi Stout, and relief prospect Andrew Moore. So how surprised were you to see the acquisition itself and also the cost that was associated with it?
Imagine 1 year ago being told the Mariners are going to have Robbie Ray and Luis Castillo in the rotation. I wouldn't have fucking believed you.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. Like I don't ever expect Jerry to go out and do the kind of, marquee signing thing because they haven't really been committed in this way before. And it's really interesting because people have been using the verbiage all in. I consider this in, very significantly in, but I wouldn't say it's all in. I think there are still they could always do more, and I think especially when you think about like continuing to think about the payroll, they're still below average in terms of payroll. So
Sure.
like they could take on contracts. They could be doing a lot more. Like, unless they do something else, I wouldn't consider it all in, but I'm very, very, very pleased that they did this because Jerry's never done this before.
Right.
I'm trying to think of, like, aside from Robbie Ray, I can't think of the most significant trade that he's made. That's really like, I mean, he said in the Dreyer article, he talked about it being really tough to move on and like to trade, like their kids. These are 4 kids. And he had some pretty sweet comments in terms of, there are a lot of like what we're building toward, and but at the end of the day, like it's something that we had to do to take a step forward as an organization. So yeah, I guess it's a really, really interesting thing. You see it happen every deadline, but it hasn't been the Mariners for
Right.
since what, like Bedard, Cliff Lee?
Yeah, I think it was Evan who pointed out to us in the Discord that like this might end up being the biggest trade of the deadline. I mean, there's a very good chance that nobody of a bigger name gets dealt, and that Luis Castillo is like the marquee piece that is remembered for being traded this deadline. Now, of course, there's been a lot of comparisons to like the Jose Barrios trade last year, which was not only a similar player and similar contract circumstance because it's a year and a half, but also a similar cost in that it was a lot more expensive than people expected. And it cost the Blue Jays 2 of their top prospects in Austin Martin and Simeon Woods Richardson. But, if Ohtani or Soto gets dealt this summer, which I don't really think is going to happen, but, by the time this episode comes out, maybe one of those things will have happened and I'll look like a total fool. I don't think either of those things are going to happen. And if that doesn't happen, who would be the next biggest name that would even go at that point? Like Happ and Contreras, maybe. You could still see like a Pablo Lopez or a Frankie Montes go, but I think those are smaller names even. JD Martinez is, I don't think, quite as big of a name. So, there's a strong chance that this is like the move that has made this deadline, which is really cool because, like you mentioned, I'm trying to think of the most impactful trades Dipoto has made. And I will say that they weren't buying moves and they didn't seem that impactful at the time. So, for example, the Cano trade famously is, I think, the biggest trade that Dipoto ever made.
Mm-hmm.
The Diamondbacks trade where they gave up Segura and they got they gave up Segura to get or did they get Haniger and Segura? I forget how that trade. They got Haniger and Segura.
Yeah.
That's right. Which was, I guess, that was a buying move.
Yeah,
I mean, I think were his biggest trades before this year, and then the Winker and Suarez deal was maybe his biggest buying move before this.
It's interesting too because that was a straight up challenge trade. And like, if you want to talk
the
about
Diamondbacks one you're talking about,
yeah, I mean, it was basically saying like, here are guys who are developing and who are good, and here are your guys who, I think it was risky on both ends. How that trade is shaken out is, I think kind of mixed. At first they were like, it's the Segura trade, and then it was the Mitch Haniger trade, and then it was really the Ketel Marte trade, and now it's like who fucking knows.
Right?
I'd be interested, and Walker moved in that deal too. I'd be interested to see the WAR totals for both teams at the end of that, but it really shouldn't be this big of a thing to move on from some prospects.
I think when you consider the fact that they were the top two prospects and that it wasn't Soto, I think everyone had worked up the idea that if we were going to give up those two, it would be for Soto. And so the fact that it wasn't has people like, oh my God, why would they do that?
Yeah. Let's see. I guess, I don't think that you're talking about Arroyo, right?
Yeah, Marte and Arroyo.
Like I don't think Arroyo's. I think a lot of people have been saying that, but I don't really disagree. He just turned, or he's turning 19 in a couple months. I mean, yeah, Marte hasn't played at high levels. Like, in some ways, this is pretty fucking palatable. Like, this is like not,
sure.
Stout has question marks as a starter. Andrew Moore, like, I would be surprised if he was a starter. Marte has question marks about staying in the infield, and like, took a dip for months in the beginning of the season. And Edwin Arroyo is freshly not a child, freshly not a kid, fresh adult. And isn't going to be, his ETA is 2026 per Fangraph. So to not trade any major leaguers and outbid this many teams, people talk a lot about the cost, but like, I think the Mariners did really well here, even despite giving up two really significant prospects.
Well, here's what I'll say to the people that are really concerned about the cost the Mariners, that this cost the Mariners in making this trade. First of all, not only did the Mariners not give up any big leaguers, like you just said, but the players they gave up won't be a part of this team in the next 2 years, and probably won't be a part of, a significant part of the team in the next 3 years. So, like, if Noelvi came up in late 2023 or 2024, I don't think he was going to be an impact player when the Mariners had their contention window. And that was a big concern at the time, and has been talked about recently also, is like, he's not really a part of the current contention window because he's so far off. And the same obviously is true of Arroyo, and Stout is not a significant enough prospect to really be of impact in that window.
Mm-hmm.
So for the Mariners to get like a player of significant impact without sacrificing anything that was going to be a part of their contention window is, I think, and this is what you're alluding to, but I think that's just a way of thinking about, I guess, the framework of this deal. And secondly, a lot of people are saying like, oh, this reminds me a lot of the Eric Bedard trade, which obviously was similar in that they gave up a lot of prospects, some of whom were top prospects, for a starting pitcher. And I said this on Twitter, but I will remind those people that Luis Castillo is not Eric Bedard. And you should not, it's easy to get reflexive and be like, oh, we've seen this happen before. But we've been asking the Mariners to make a move like this for a long, long time. And Isabel Manassian made a great point at Lookout Landing in saying something like this, which is that this is what we've been begging the team to do. We've been begging the franchise to make a move where, they buy into your point, even if it's not all in, that they buy into the current window. They believe in the current window, and they stop like kind of kicking the can down the road, which is kind of what we've seen them do in their quote unquote buy moves. Is they buy players who are, still on contract for several years. Like the Winker move was a good example of that. It was a buy, win now move, but he's also on contract for a little bit. But this Castillo move is very obviously, we are trying to win this year and next year, and we don't care what it costs, which is super encouraging, and I hope extends beyond this just beyond this summer, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But I want to talk about Castillo, the player, because I don't think we've talked enough about, who are the Mariners acquiring in this deal. So Castillo, he was an all-star this year with the Reds, missed a little bit of the beginning of this season with a shoulder injury, which worried some people, and will probably worry other people when they learn that, because the Mariners just paid a lot to get him. But he has been nothing short of dominant this year. He has a very strong track record. He has a better track record than Robbie Ray does, even if, he hasn't had a season as good as Robbie Ray's last year was. But what have you seen in Castillo, and what makes you like him? Because I know you're a big fan of his.
Yeah, I've always really adored him. I still remember the Jeff Sullivan article that I forgot what it was called, but it was essentially like, it might be like the Reds ace is already made or whatever. And it had to do with, him starting to really change the way that he used his fastballs to help them play off each other. And it really makes you think of Ray and Robbie Ray, and a pitcher that we'll get to in a little bit. But he has one of the best changeups in baseball. And this has been a very weird year for him, because that changeup has probably more than ever, not been right, I suppose, which, might make people worry. But also more than ever, his fastball looks really good. If you think about fastball CSW, he's at 34% with his with both his slider and his fastball, and which means he's been in the zone more than ever, because he's ticked up his fastball usage. Really, for the first time, is throwing his four-seamer more than his changeup. And I think the thing that has changed with his changeup is, the reason why his changeup is so good is that he throws practically sidearm, like a lower arm slot and release point than almost anyone. And that's coming out of, if you think about vertical release point, like he has no pitch extension and yet still throws from one of the lower release points in baseball, which is really hard because extension allows you to get down the mound and throw from a lower release point. All of that is to say, his spin direction starts very horizontally because of that arm slot. He's able to create a lot of depth because he throws a pretty efficient changeup, and so it spins. There's a lot of active spin sideways, and it has a lot of seam shifted wake, so it shifts downwards on the way to the plate. It's done that less this year, and so he's creating less depth, which is, I think, kind of helped, or not helped, but it's made it harder for him to create that separation from his fastballs. And I think, actually, in looking at it, like, he struggled last year throwing his changeup for as many strikes as he's done before. Generally, like, his changeup was a 34 CSW pitch, and it's 22 this year and 26 last year. So this is actually something that maybe, actually, yeah, I really remember him struggling last year, right, in 2021.
He had a really tough beginning of the year, if you remember. Like, I want to say through June or July or
Yeah,
beginning of July, he was just absolutely atrocious. And then he really turned it
yeah,
around.
yeah. And so the changeup just hasn't really been right, and so all that's to say, he's someone with a plus changeup, at least at times, and now he has a really good fastball. So if he's able to get his changeup back to where it was, and I think my hypothesis last year uh, was that his release point um, repeatability wasn't there. He's going to be someone with a really, really filthy fastball, but also a changeup. And I mean, like, if he puts it together, I think he'll legitimately be better than ever. But regardless, I think what you have is as a floor, a number, maybe not a floor, but as a baseline, like a number 2 starter with ace upside, and with a good floor, because like, even if he's not throwing his changeup for strikes, he's still going to be inducing weak contact. I really adore him. He's like, he really is a lot of what these progressive ace like pitchers look like nowadays. The little arm slot, yeah.
And to have him be in the Mariners system, which we know is great at pitching development, and the changes they made with Ray, which you said we talk about in a little bit, with Kirby, similarly, you recently wrote about. But the Mariners are known to kind of get the most out of these guys, and the fact the Mariners gave up this much for him when there were so many starters on the market tells me that they have identified something in him that they think that they can either improve upon or that they can really get the most out of what he is right now. Additionally, I wonder if, one of the reasons they were willing to make this kind of trade is because they think that they could extend him. He is 29 and his contract goes through the 2023 season. So his age 30 season. So if you're going to extend him, it, probably isn't for, that much more than 4 years, maybe, if you want to sign him through 34. Um, but I'm curious if the Mariners try to go for something like that this winter, maybe to lock him down for those next few years. I think really the priority is not only extending him, but also Julio in France, which we've talked about. And I wonder if that takes away from the Mariners potentially being a player for one of these major bats in free agency, like a Judge or a Trey Turner. But I guess we'll see what the Mariners are willing to spend on that front. Regardless, Castillo is very clearly like the front runner of a playoff rotation, where if you're in a 3-game or, if you're in a 5-game series and you have a 3-man rotation, it would be Castillo, Ray, Gilbert, with Kirby coming out of the bullpen, and then Kirby coming back into the rotation when you get deeper into the playoffs, God willing. That's a really, really good core to have. Not only for this year, but also for 2023. If all those guys stay healthy, that is what a playoff rotation looks like. And whoever that 5th guy is, whether, it's Flexen or Marco or Emerson Hancock or, any, insert prospect or acquisition here, that's a really good looking staff. Well, what's that?
I said Dollard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. And I'm looking now. I think it seems like a lot of it. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, wow. His changeup efficacy, if you just look at like whiffs per zone, really, really, really has been affected this year. I think. Oh my God, his changeup used to be so filthy. I think. I think that a lot of it probably has to do with pitch location, and yeah, I think the Mariners are, they're smarter than a lot of teams. They're going to be able to help him do what he needs to do. I don't know. Yeah, I really think that he can get back to more of what he was. But even if he does it, like I said, like um, his floor is much higher than a lot of guys. let's see. We got a couple questions, like live questions in the Discord. One is Jacob said, why does Pipeline have Levi Stout so high? I think maybe we'll get to that in a second, because King Hippo asks, would you rather have Castillo or Montes?
I think that's a better question for you to answer, because I know that you're big on both guys and you've really looked into both guys. Personally, I'd rather have Castillo. Another angle to this whole Castillo thing, which we haven't really touched on yet, though, is the fact that, us getting Castillo means other teams don't get him. It's going to be real fun. I really hope he shoves against the Yankees when he pitches against them next week, because the Yankee tears will be absolutely flowing if that
Oh my
happens.
God, yeah.
But also, the fact the Rangers were in on him, the Mariners got him, I think that probably pushed Dipoto to maybe include a player he didn't want to initially. Because you really don't want that guy to be in Texas's hands for next season when the Rangers could be very scary. But yeah, to answer that question, I'd rather have Castillo. I think Montes is good, but Montes has had up and downs the way that Castillo hasn't. Aside from early last year, Castillo's been pretty consistent, and Montes has had his bumps in the road. But I'm curious what you think.
I think Montes aspires to be Castillo. The fastball definitely isn't as good. I think, like, in general, when you look at maybe like the past 3 years, I don't think that the splitter is as good as Castillo's changeup. I mean, they're pretty similar pitchers right now in terms of like pitch mix. But Montes throws the sinker more. So I think Castillo has the way better fastball right now. And I think he also has, at least, it's hard to talk about, because like in general, I'd say like Castillo has a better changeup easy in terms of like throwing strikes. Yeah, they actually are pretty similar, but I would take Castillo. I tend to think that Montes doesn't require as much of a haul, so there's that to consider. But if we're asking, who would you rather have?
You do have to consider
Castillo.
The interdivision tax.
Yeah,
that may have cost them about as much. But go on.
I mean, yeah, I think like if you look at Montes, he's never had an. I don't really often consider ex-Woba in terms of pitchers, because whatever, it's really noisy. Montes currently doesn't even have an ex-Woba below 300. It's 301. So that's like a slightly above average pitcher. This year, that might just be average, because ex-Woba is down. So yeah, I don't know. I've always really thought Montes was overrated. I don't know, maybe because he throws a splitter. Who knows? And I kind of changed my mind on that recently, and I don't remember why. And now I'm kind of back to thinking the same thing. Like last year, he had a CSW over 30, really like 28 and above with all 4 pitches. This year, I mean, it's 2 pitches above 28, which isn't so great. I'm kind of moving away from CSW in many ways, because it doesn't capture everything. All that is to say, Castillo has the ace upside. Montes does not. I would rather have Castillo, and I'd rather give up, more prospects for Castillo than Montes. I think Montes has more club control, so there's that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's easy, to be honest.
Again, I think that's why the extension may play into it. Like I kind of expect the Mariners to try to extend him. Especially based on what they gave up. I think, Dipoto really hates losing deals. And I think that if he's able to, give Castillo a 3 or 4 year extension, it will make him feel a lot better about it, even if there's an opt-out or 2 in there. But what you say is really exciting when you consider the fact that, those 4 starters, which we named before, all have ace upside, right? I mean, there's an argument to be made that all 4 of them could be a number 1 starter if things go right for them, especially next year, right? Like there's a scenario in which all 4 of those guys are like potential all-stars. So I think that's like a,
Mm-hmm.
top 5 percentile outcome to have all 4 of them be that, but any 4 of those guys could be an all-star next year. So I
Right.
think that's really exciting when you're loading up your rotation with guys like that. Yeah.
To get to Jacob's question, oh, I get it. Like Jacob.
Yeah.
I don't know why MLB Pipeline likes Stout so much.
I have a thought.
I would love to hear it.
Well, first of all, I don't know what he was in the Mariners pipeline because they've already moved him to the Reds side where he's number 15. But the Reds have a deeper system now than Seattle, so I assume he was probably like top 12, top 10, maybe. I think that one of the reasons why is that Pipeline has identified him as a likely big leaguer. He's got proximity, and he has I want to say it's kind of like a Paul Blackburn-esque profile, which is, the Mariners traded Paul Blackburn way back when. Who was that? That was for the Yonder Alonso trade, I think.
Who knows? Damn, yeah.
But anyway, it's kind of a similar spot that Blackburn was in and that Stout is in now, where like Stout looks like a number 4 or number 5 starter. And I think that even though that's not a high ceiling, Pipeline has identified him as being a guy who more than likely will be a big leaguer and probably will be a back-end starter / long relief guy. And that's more valuable than you can say of like a teenager in the DSL who's like 17 and still you have no idea what they're going to become, because their chances of becoming a big leaguer are a lot slimmer. So I'm guessing it's a proximity thing. Stout is 24, and even though he's not killing it in AA, he still looks the part. That's my take on that.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it's that, it's a floor kind of low variation thing, but like his command's pretty good. I saw him, I think, I don't even remember when this was, maybe last summer in Everett. And, I'm not someone like, I honestly don't even know how scouts do it, like to be able to see anything from the stands, but I was pretty underwhelmed. I think he walked a lot of guys that game. I think the consensus is actually more of a middle relief kind of guy, and a swing starter kind of profile. He doesn't have anything that's super plus to me. I think things flash plus, and he has solid weapons, but I don't know that, like, I know that Dipoto talked about, I'm trying to think, him and maybe Dollard as potential options to come up later in the year. Like, that wasn't an exciting thing to me. That was oh yay, I might not have to watch Flexen or Marco pitch as often. Which
I think if Stout becomes Flexen, that's a very good outcome for him. That's my take on that.
Yeah, which, like, good Lord. I mean, I think a lot of the time if a minor leaguer becomes Flexen, that's a good outcome. So
that's true.
But so that is a really, that moving him is a pretty, he is going to become a major leaguer, likely, probably not an exceptional one. Andrew Moore is more of a lottery ticket kind of thing.
Well, and he's a bullpen arm. He's a quick moving bullpen arm. And to me, I think in most organizations, it would suck to give up a guy who throws 102 at his max velocity. But in the Mariners organization, it's like, whatever. We have like 8 more of those, eight more guys where that came from.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we're actually, like at the halfway point. I think that segues nicely into what the Mariners do have in the rotation. We've touched on this some. Maybe this is a good place to talk about the Kirby article that I dropped yesterday.
Okay, go for it. What have you seen in George Kirby?
So I wrote about him, dropped it. Yes, filed it 2 days ago, dropped it yesterday, and before the pod, Durs was kind of laughing because he was going over it and saying like It's funny that in your lead you mentioned like Luis Castillo as a potential option, which I didn't think was a one that I expected whatsoever.
Right.
I actually think it was the other way around, but I think the framing really was the Mariners will probably make an addition, hopefully, dear God, hopefully. But they could also get, boosts from guys that are already in their rotation. We've seen that with Ray, who, his last two starts have been pretty shaky, but has looked better since introducing the two-seamer. I think it's the same thing with Kirby, who, like, we've talked about him a lot. And I think, in a way, I've become less optimistic about him as time has passed because he's just such an unsexy guy where, like he has a K percentage in the lower to mid 20s, doesn't get that many whiffs, commands the ball supremely well, like, elite command, doesn't walk anyone, but has a home run problem right now. And so like between the home run problem and not striking enough guys out, at least, I think, it's like, okay, where does he take the step forward? Because when you think about pitchers, they're generally either pronators, which means they're able to rip off a high efficiency fastball, or they're supinators. And pronation and supination, they're just essentially ways to describe the way that you're releasing the ball. Based on how guys throw, they're usually able to do one more than the other. There are just some guys that can do both, and those guys are unicorns. Kirby, I would argue, is more of a pronator, even though he throws kind of a gyro fastball below 90% spin efficiency. And a super, we've talked about this for months since we had Joe Doyle on, a super stock, super generic, arm slot, which means really generic pitch movement. And so I have never really been hopeful since seeing him pitch that he's ever going to be able to throw a plus breaker. His fastball also plays, it's weird, like based on its velocity, it's pretty solid. It plays down because of its movement, but it plays up because of his ability to command it and put it where he wants. So it's kind of just like right around where you might kind of think. But he hasn't had another weapon. Like the changeup metrically gets a ton of depth and is a really good looking pitch. It hasn't had the results and the whiffs that you might want from it, and that's probably because he needs to throw it out of the zone more. But all that is to say, like, I really thought his ceiling was capped. And then the past month has happened. And it happened, it was kind of sneaky because I don't think that many people talked about it. Kirby added a two-seamer against the Blue Jays before the All-Star break. And it wasn't something that he threw a ton, but it was essentially a Robbie Ray thing where he was just saying, I need to get guys off my fastball, and so I'm going to tunnel it with a two-seamer, and I call it that because it doesn't sink. It's more of a runner. Gets more ride than a two-seamer generally does, and gets more run. And so it really is the same idea as Robbie Ray. That is exciting. It also, I talk about in the article, it's something that he uses against lefties a lot. His problem actually isn't lefties. He runs reverse splits. What he needs is a breaker to be able to throw away from righties, or at least to throw in the zone and accumulate strikes. He hasn't had that. What's more exciting to me, and something that I think he'll use less for the time being because it's still developing, and also Robbie Ray did teach him that two-seamer a month or so ago, is George Kirby's throwing a sweeper now. He only threw 3 in this past game, but I'm rattling this off top. 84 miles per hour, 14 inches of sweep, which is up from 1 inch of sweep, and a negative 3 inches of induced vertical break, which means, it gets a lot of depth. That's a really fucking good pitch. That's That's a pitch that Matt Brash would rip off. It's not one that he would rip off, every time. It's like if you look at his kind of his cluster of pitches, it's one that doesn't get as much sweep as usual, is thrown a little less firm. But that's a Matt Brash pitch that he, like, I could probably go find, has thrown 84 miles per hour, -3 IVB, 14 inches of sweep. That's a really legit pitch. And I think I say in the article, all three of those traits are above average, even when you're just considering sweepers, like pitches tagged to sweepers by Baseball Prospectus. So, or pitch info, if you want to be really specific. If he can throw that 10 to 15% of the time and command it, like, he becomes, and that's probably disproportionately against righties, he becomes a much better pitcher because I'm trying to remember, I don't know if you have the article pulled up, his home runs per 9 against righties is maybe like 2.15.
Yeah, it was somewhere in that range. I don't have it up right now.
And righties, you faced righties more than lefties, like, as a starting pitcher. So, that's something to think about is, most of the time you need to see, like, where specifically are these changes happening. Usually, they're kind of happening against one batter handedness more than the other. I think the two-seamer is going to help against righties. He'll be able to run it in on the hands against righties. He'll be able to throw backdoor two-seamers, but he's going to be able to sweep sweepers off the plate and hopefully, get hitters to chase. But if not, throw them in the zone because, if you, Paul Sewald does it a lot. Like, if you throw at a right-handed hitter's front hip, the ball's going to drift into the zone and you're going to get a front door, called strike, because no one's going to swing at that unless they really, hang in there, but it's hard. That was a monologue, but I'm more optimistic about Kirby being basically a Luis Castillo level pitcher than I've ever been before. And I think it's like, I don't know how to phrase it. I think it's a very attainable outcome.
That'd be great, obviously.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind it. There's question marks now about, for this, the short term. I mean, first of all, do the Mariners trade him? Kind of doubt that.
Well, I think that, and to me, that was much more on the table when it seemed like Soto was a possibility. But since they traded both Marte and Arroyo, I think Soto's off the table. So I think Kirby's probably off the table. But part of me wondered, and I don't think this is like a Jerry thing to do, but the reason for getting Castillo is to make Kirby expendable so that you can go get a Soto or Ohtani or whatever. But I just don't think that's going to happen. I wonder if Jerry's even still talking about Soto at this point, or if he just said, don't even bother. Or we're not going to entertain this now that we have Castillo. But that would be a hell of a deadline to get Castillo and Soto.
Oh my God. I tend to think that, it's not something so much that Jerry would say. I think he'll always be like, keep us posted, whatever, we're still interested. That the Nationals would probably say, like, y'all don't have. They could, but it would really clean their farm out.
Yeah, I mean, what would the package even look like? It would be like Kirby, Kelnick, Hancock.
You have to start. I think you have to start with Kelnick and Ford, and move from there. And it's it's actually kind of bleak. Like, it, I don't know. I still think it was already top heavy. Like, at one point, I was like, yeah, this is the best farm system in baseball. More recently, I'm like, yeah, it's top 5, especially now that we've seen Kelnick struggle and Julio, was struggling up first. I don't think they have the top end to really compete with other teams. I just think that they have a lot of Bryce Millers and Dollards that carry risk, but I think are going to be legit, at least legit bullpen arms. they'll continue to build, but I would be shocked. I already would have been shocked, but I would be fucking floored if the Mariners could even entertain an offer that. I think really you have to take on like Strasburg and Corbin.
Yeah. And I don't think they're going to do that
Which
because that really hamstrings them for what they can do in the future. And Jerry hates not having the flexibility.
just move Flexen and Marco, and we'll just deal with it.
So I do want to speak on the farm real quick because I know we're about to get to like what else the Mariners could potentially do at the deadline. But on the farm, I am not concerned. I agree with you that I think if you were to take a snapshot of the Mariners farm system at this precise moment, I think they're firmly bottom half of baseball, and it might be bottom third because I don't think they have the top end. But the players that are needed for this contention window are here, right? Like the prospects that are still potentially going to be a part of this run are like Kelnick, Dollard, Hancock, maybe a bullpen piece or two. Like that's it though. Like those are the guys. Like this is the squad, which I think is fine because this squad is pretty freaking good, especially if you sign another guy this winter. But they do have what, Kate Pruser, Look at Landing refers to as like this second wave. The players that are in Modesto and the Complex League, which has been gutted a little bit with Marte and Arroyo gone, but you still have Ford. You now have Cole Young. You have those high school arms they just signed. You still have Michael Morales, who they had last year, who was pretty well liked. Brian Wu has been really good. They have Prelander Baroa, who's been really good. These guys are not like right now top prospects, but these are guys the Mariners know how to develop, and they could develop into being very interesting pieces that could either be traded down the line or could be a part of a second wave of prospects. Plus, they just signed Lazar Montes, who's a very top, teenage prospect, and they have Felon and Celestine coming in. Joe Doyle pointed out on Twitter that they're going to get another pick for Julio if and when he wins Rookie of the Year, knock on wood. And this team has a couple of years before this contention window is closed to build that farm back up and keep things moving. So I don't think it's a good farm now, and maybe that's a problem if they're like, we really need a third baseman next year or something, at the deadline, and they just don't have the pieces to get it. But I am not really worried at this point because I think that once this team is like on its way down, that wave will be on the way up to come help.
That's true. And I think part of this is strategic. That's why the Mariners are taking more prep guys than ever, in the past 2 years. And that's because of the way that they've built up their farm system. The thing is, right now, the Mariners, like according to Fangraphs, don't have a future value 50 guy unless you count Brash or Kirby or Julio, who I do not
yet, but they could develop a guy into that potentially.
This is true. I just think I think you always want to have guys in there. So I don't know. I'm not worried. I'm just it's tough to, maybe I am a little worried. It's tough to strike a balance between competing and making sure, that you have those reinforcements later on, because the good teams like the Dodgers, I talk about this all the time. I always use the Dodgers as an example, but they're always able to, someone goes down, they're like, okay, well, let's pull a guy from the minor leagues and try and, see if this works. But the Mariners don't really have that right now.
Well, the thing about the Dodgers and the Yankees is that they're always good, and yet they always manage to burn and churn the minor leaguers because they have good development systems, and they turn guys like Anthony Volpe into Anthony Volpe, right? Like this is a guy who many people are comparing Cole Young to Volpe, like a late first round pick who was not thought of super highly, but has turned into a top 10 prospect. So if the Mariners want to become an organization like that, they have to be able to burn and churn guys through the development process. And right now, you look at it and you don't see those players. But what I'm saying is, if the Mariners are that organization, they will turn a couple of these guys into potentially top 10 prospects, but impact big leaguers. So it
Yeah,
remains to be
I think
seen, I
that's fair.
think.
Yeah, and just real quickly, if we want to talk about the health of the rotation in the short term, and I don't mean the like literal health, but just efficacy, functionality. I tweeted yesterday about Saris posted an article about stuff gainers and decliners, and really in their past 400 pitches, the second highest gainer was Flexen, which piqued my interest because Flexen doesn't have very good stuff. And I haven't really got to watch him pitch lately, and so I was kind of wondering, like, I wonder if he's throwing the cutter and changeup more and really fading the fastball, whatever. Kind of. He is fading the fastball. He added a slider that he just started throwing in the outfield.
The Mariners love a sweeper.
And yeah, it's not quite a sweeper, but it does get, I think, 9 inches of sweep. It's not like a very, when you think about generally what makes a good pitch is it's not like other pitches, or it's incongruent, kind of with the movement you would expect out of the arm slot. It's a pretty unique pitch. It gets more depth and more sweep than I'm trying to remember. Actually, I need to look. But then a general, typical slider, and he throws it pretty firm, like in the 80s. And so, kind of in the same way as Kirby, yeah, a little more sweep than a couple more inches more sweep than a general slider, and more depth. Like it's probably his best pitch instantly if he can command it and put it, where he wants. It gives him the pitch that the curveball was kind of supposed to be, I think. And his fastball is just like, especially now that he's hemorrhaged some velo, not good. Very straight, very not even 92 miles per hour even. I think he might be able to piecemeal it together where, if you go more cutters, changeups, sliders, and the fastball is more of a like almost show me pitch, change a pace, get me over, whatever. I think he actually becomes a lot more interesting in a way that I don't consider Marco to be.
Yeah, if we one aspect of the Castillo trade we didn't touch on was what would happen. Like, how are you going to put him into the rotation? I personally don't expect it's going to be a straight up 6-man, especially given the guys they have right now. I don't think you're going to waste getting Castillo by giving him an extra day of rest. I think what they're going to do is they're going to do a little mix and match where they're going to, continue to manage Kirby's workload. And so Castillo will start in place of Kirby sometimes. I think you might see some cases in which you skip a Flexen or Marco start and they're available out of the pen for a few days. I think that's kind of what it's going to be. Is you're going to make sure Castillo, Ray, and Gilbert get theirs, and then the other 3 guys are going to kind of rotate in and out. At least that's what I hope. I fear that it's only going to be Flexen who gets the short end of the stick, and that you're going to be keeping Marco on the staff. But I hope that they recognize Marco is just not getting it done right now. Yeah.
It is kind of interesting for me to think about what Flexen could look like in, to keep his innings up and in a multi-inning role where he doesn't have to go 3 times through and he's able to kind of reach back and throw a little harder.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested to see what that looks like. Like, Craig Goldstein DM'd me last night, and he was kind of at BP. They go over kind of the percentage of, starters, like how their share of games. And it's like, just want to double check, what are the Mariners doing here? And I was like, good question. I don't fucking know. Flexen or Marco could get booted. We could see Kirby and someone piggyback. Like, I don't think the
Kirby
Mariners,
Brash, maybe. Yeah.
I don't think the Mariners quite know yet.
They said they're going to sit
okay.
down and talk about it, actually. That's what I saw.
Right.
Dipoto said or maybe you even said that he and Service are going to sit
Yeah.
down and discuss the plan for the rotation, basically.
With Woody and with whatever 4th guy. I don't think it should be a worry, I think it's like you make the addition, you figure it out.
Which is, it's cool they did that. They threw caution to the wind, because you've seen the Mariners like kind of say, "Oh well, I don't know who's gonna, I don't really know who we could acquire, because then you'd have to kick someone out." I'm glad they just said
Right.
"fuck it," and they just were like, "We'll
Right.
figure it out later."
Yeah. So, I think, obviously they get the improvement of Luis Castillo going out there every 5 days. Kirby should be better, should be improved. Ray, has been improved as of late, and Flexen, might be able to. His skills might be better, so he might be able to maintain the results he's had, because I think he has an ERA around 3.5, 3.6. Same with Marco. So rotation looks like it's in decent shape. I wouldn't be mad if they made another addition. That's
Let's
on
talk
that
about
point.
that.
Yeah.
Yes. So the Mariners
yeah.
are still supposedly in the market. Dipoto said after the trade. Well, first of all, he said that they're more than likely, if they're going to upgrade, to be a bullpen upgrade, which I think is a good idea for depth. I mean, obviously they don't have like a huge need for bullpen, but it's probably gonna be cheaper to upgrade the bullpen. He says that in terms of getting a bat, he reiterated that with Haniger and Lewis returning, it makes it tough to upgrade the offense, because you know where are you going to find space for the upgrade? Which I get. I understand that. When you look at the way the lineup is constructed now, it's like, who are you going to boot? Well, Adam Frazier, but Jerry, we know, is very tied to Frazier. Really thinks Frazier's going to turn it around, and to his credit, he has kind of turned it around recently. So a lot of people were, asking, why didn't Drury come out of this trade with the Reds, who was a popular infield / utility rental bat who was on the market. But apparently Dipoto isn't really interested in Drury, and that they think this is probably more of an outlier year for him, which I think is probably true.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
I think,
I
yeah,
was
sorry.
I was just having that. No, I cut you off. I was just having this conversation this morning. And right now I'm pulling up, like his ex Woba and Woba are pretty different. It kind of reminds me actually of another Reds player, of Zach
Solano.
Cozart.
Oh,
No, like back in the day. I don't know if you remember, the
yes, of
Mariners
course I
were
do. And then the Angels
really
got him.
right. They were tied to him, and I don't remember how he performed, but obviously, like, it wasn't what he'd been doing. So what I'm looking at right now is like what percentage of his batted balls are, you have to think about optimization. So like what percentage of his batted balls are pulled fly balls, because otherwise his peripherals don't say that he's better. And so, he's also not the greatest second baseman. I'm pulling up that now. I think I saw that his pull percentage is up a tad, his fly ball percentage is up a tad, and yeah, and looking at it, God, he's like rarely played over the past couple of years. It's hard to even look at it. It looks like it's about the same. It's hard to say because he has so few. If you look at his 2019, which is the last time he had a significant amount of batted balls, he's up from 5.2% to 9.6% in terms of what percentage of his batted balls are pulled fly balls. That's a really good way to optimize pull power. I talk about it all the time. So actually, let me compare that versus every year, not this year, because that's a better way to get a sample size. So yeah, 9.6 versus like 5.8 over the past like 5 years. Maybe it's somewhat legit. Baseball's weird. Like that's a small change, like 4% of your overall batted balls, but it also turns a lot of not very good 4%, of your not very good batted balls into better batted balls, likely. That's all to say, I don't know why you would. The Reds have someone who I'm more interested in, and who I think they're more likely to move for a C-level prospect than Drury, who which is Donovan Solano, who has like a 136 WRC plus and is 34. The Reds don't have any use for him. Like we talked about, I think pre-pod, it's like they were on the phone with them, they would have done that.
Yeah,
but maybe not. I think it's Jerry. So sorry to cut you off. Those are just my thoughts on Drury.
No, it's okay. Yeah, no, that's good stuff. I think the Mariners, if they're going to do anything, it's going to be a rental player because of the state of the farm right now. Someone who you could potentially trade, a Caden Polkovich, a Zach Deloach, one of those C-level prospects for. And to me, there's a very small number of players. We've talked about catching. Potentially, they'd be in on like a Christian Vasquez to take some of the load off of Cal Raleigh. I think that, while I don't think backup catcher is something that they need to address, if they could get someone like Vasquez, who is, probably going to be pretty cheap from the Red Sox, I think that's something that you do in order to take some load off Torrens. The only problem is that then you have to DFA Torrens because he's out of options. And I think they might be resistant to do that because they probably worry that he's going to get claimed by one of the lower level teams. There's some infielders, Wilmer Flores, if the Giants decide to sell. I know you're a fan of Nico Horner. These are guys who could replace Toro and give him some much needed breathing time in Tacoma.
Send him to AAA, yeah.
Yeah. And he has options, so that's totally doable. And he needs it. You can tell he just looks so lost at the plate. They would really benefit from being able to get someone in that could play his at-bats, basically.
I think Flores is one of the most underrated role players in baseball and MLB. He's really consistently put up a couple WAR like every year since.
Yeah,
not
he's a good hitter.
Like 2017. Yeah, just consistently hits above average. Do you remember when he got traded and he found out mid game?
Well,
so sad.
He didn't actually get traded. I thought
right.
He thought he was going to get traded,
but he did. Yeah. That's completely beside the point. But
that's all anyone remembers about Wilmer Flores.
I mean, we've talked about it a lot. Like I saw some comments so I have this super. This is also besides the point, but every night, they hate when I say this, but I'm in a situationship right now.
Oh dear.
And so my partner and I will be hanging out, and I'll often give them a ride home at 11 p.m. or they'll be at my house, and I get really sleepy around 11 p.m. and I just can't think anymore, can't talk anymore, can't get up and brush my teeth and go to bed. That also happens when I'm helping out my brother and sister-in-law with my nieces. So I was holding my niece's hand last night, falling asleep and just kind of waking up every couple minutes. And it's just always this thing where that happens. I get into that process and then I wake up more so at 1 and I'm alert. I'll go home. But I sleepily read this Larry Stone article last night where he was really optimistic and said I would be surprised if this was the last thing that the Mariners did, which is pretty strong wording. And I'm trying to remember, he said he just said some really surprising thing. I hope my Seattle Times reads are now. If so, I will actually, never mind, redacted. And yeah, I'm trying to find, I'll find the wording, but it's really interesting. It's what are they going to do?
Well, I think it's going to be a Tyler Anderson level move, whether that's a bat or an arm. I think it's going to be, a rental player, mid-level, but still a guy who probably is going to play some significant time for the team. So I expect, there's a number of starters who are going to be free agents. We talked about Evaldi potentially, Quintana. I think those are guys who they could seek to go after. The only question is then really, what do you do with the rotation? Are you just saying fuck you to Marco? At that point, there's no room for Marco and Flexen in this staff. So I kind of wonder if I feel like a bat is more likely because it's clearer. You send down Toro and the new infielder takes that spot.
And that's why I say, I think Flexen is more likely to tick up if he goes to the bullpen. I think Marco, Yeah. It's weird. Every time I give up on him, that motherfucker goes out, throws 6 innings of 2 or 3 run ball with his 0 or 1 strikeouts.
Hey, I
feel
think
like
he had
this
like
yerba
4 in
mate
his
is
last
really
start.
kicking in. Yeah. I got some the caffeine. I do want to rattle off a couple quotes from this article because I think there's a couple zingers in here. One is that, yeah, like one is those who've been watching the Mariners are screaming that they need a bat, not an arm, and him saying, well, they need both, and I would almost guarantee Dipoto's not done. They get the sort of. I think it's also very important to think about what if they make the wild card. It's different this year. It's a 3-game wild card series. They need someone like Castillo, I think, to be able to to have the option of throwing out Ray, Gilbert, Castillo, and Kirby somewhere mixed in there.
Yeah,
it's pretty compelling.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. He also makes the comment that like if Soto's a no-go, also it's Soto. I'm such a Seattleite, but I think it's important to get pronunciation right, obviously. Yeah, most people don't say it right, but Soto is a no-go. He says Dipoto will need to augment their offense as his top priority. They've been winning a lot of close games, a lot of low-scoring games. He specifically names the likes of Ian Happ, Brandon Drury, John Birdie, Brian Reynolds, perhaps. And
Wow,
also
that would
mentions,
be something.
Right? Also mentions the backup catcher.
Yeah.
And then I think at the end he says, all they need is a little boost, or even better, a big boost. And on Friday they got one. There should be more to come. That's from someone with insight,
Yeah,
So
that's exciting.
and the picture of the article is Dipoto flipping a ball up and like on the phone. It's just, I don't know, but I think that makes this conversation that we're having even more meaningful. It's like, what does that look like?
Right. Well, potentially moot by the time this comes out and it's in your ears, but we'll see.
He made the comment the other day that I thought was strange, which is like, we don't have that many holes to plug. We'll keep our ear to the street, see kind of what we can do. It's like, bro, you have maybe not like holes or black holes, but you have plenty of places where you can make additions. And I think the most important thing that they could do right now is some sort of pitching addition, probably some sort of swingman, someone to play second base so that Frazier can move into a utility role. Toro can go to Triple A. And maybe a reliever. I know that they already are pretty, we talked about Kenny Giles, I think you said. They have plenty of places they could do things. Ty France can move to second base. They could add. I know there's kind of a lot with first base DH and what people are calling a clogged outfield, but I kind of disagree. That being said, there are things that they could do. Many things.
Well, we shall see what those things are. Mikey, are there any final thoughts for you as we wrap up the show?
I don't think so. I think we'll probably have a pretty quick turnaround, if there are any other trades. But
well, yeah, if they trade for Brian Reynolds, I think we'll be right back on here in a couple days.
Right. Oh my God. But I September was a really exciting time for us as fans. I mean, obviously we're analysts, whatever, but we're also fans of this team. And I've never been as excited about this team at the deadline as I am right now. So
no, I think that's a good point.
I mean, their odds of getting into the playoffs right now are 75%.
That's pretty sick.
I looked last night. Yeah. So I think Patrick 77%. I don't know how to say Patrick's last name.
Dubuque.
That's what I was gonna say. he said, the Mariners have flirted with 75% before, and come to find out 75 isn't the same as 100. That's true, but it feels different. And I think given the extra wild card spot, given the 3-game series, I think, you have to really have the expectation right now that unless the Mariners really flounder, and if they make the additions they shouldn't, that they're going to make the playoffs for the first time since 2001.
Here's to hoping, folks. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this show. I'm Anders, and you can find me on Twitter at Anders Jorstad. You can find Michael on Twitter at Kuya at _Kuya Mikey. Sorry. You can also find Evan, even though he's not on this show, but he will be back shortly. You can find him at Evan James Audio. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you stream your podcasts. And additionally, you can support the podcast on Patreon by going to patreon.com/neversunnyinseattle. And we'll put another Discord link in the description as well. Feel free to join. It's getting more active, like by the day, basically. And that's a place where we put all of our requests for questions and whatever. So if you guys have questions you either want to ask the chat and we answer in real time, we do that. Or you can ask questions for the podcast and we'll answer them here in front of everybody. So it's a great opportunity to talk Mariners and have a little community. But other than that, thanks for listening, and go Mariners.